Thanks very much. Oops, hang on, I'm just wrecking the joint. Is that working? Can
you all hear?
Can you all hear me? Is that working? Thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming, and thanks for the invitation to speak to you. I think we all know that this regulation is a really important piece of legislation, and everybody tells me that the current legislation on clinical trials needs urgently to be revised. There's been a severe decline in the number of clinical trials carried out in Europe. Between 2007 and 2011, the number of trials carried out dropped by about a quarter, by about 25%. Not only has this got dire economic consequences, but of course it hinders the advance of medicine to the detriment of patients, and that's the most important thing. We must make Europe an attractive place for companies to carry out research, but we also, it's very important that we foster academic research and encourage the development of medicines of rare diseases, so that's been our aim. And at the same time, we also have to be a world leader in both patient safety and, in my view, transparency. That's in the interest of both the public trust and good science. And I know that's a very controversial issue, one of the most controversial issues. I think it's fair to say that the European Commission have done a really good job with their proposals. I'm not just saying that because he's sat next to me, but I really do think they've done a good job. They've listened carefully to people's concerns, particularly those of the academic community. Having a regulation rather than a directive will mean it'll become law directly in all member states. At the moment, the patchwork of differently implemented legislation across the EU makes cross-border trials extremely difficult and very expensive, and that's part of the problem. It makes it especially difficult for those working with rare diseases, where small patient populations make it imperative to work across borders. The Commission has been quite ambitious, and their proposed timelines for approval demand a lot from the authorities, ethics committees and sponsors. But, you know, long approval times make trials more expensive. There are ambitious timelines, but in my view they're achievable and they're based on current best practice in the EU. There's many concerns, I know, about them being too short, with many governments wanting to lengthen them. I want to make sure we end up with as short timelines as is feasible. I'm supporting the Commission proposal, and I hope to get that through the Parliament to give us a good starting point for negotiations with the Council. One of the most positive ideas is the EU portal. Sponsors only need to submit one uniform application for approval. That's got to be beneficial, particularly for those working on rare diseases. I also welcome the concept of the low intervention trials, which will be a huge difference in terms of the amount of bureaucracy to make it simpler, and it'll be better for less risky trials generally carried out by academics. And one of the best proposals I think the Commission come forward with is the National Indemnification Scheme. I think that's a really good idea because insurance costs for trials are astronomical, and this often can deter academic trials, especially into rare diseases. Presently, much of the public money that's invested into into research is spent on insurance fees. That's ridiculous. The running costs of an indemnification scheme would be relatively small for EU governments. And there's good working examples. We've had good working examples from Denmark and other countries, so it does work. Having said that, everything that's good and that I like about it, there are some aspects that I want to change. There's three main points I'm focusing on. One is the trial relevance, the ethics and the transparency. First of all, a small point on definitions. There's been a lot of confusion amongst stakeholders about the Commission's differing definitions of clinical studies and clinical trials, because these terms are used interchangeably in international guidelines. So after much discussion, I'm proposing to change the definition of clinical study to study relating to medicinal products in order to clear up that confusion. On trial relevance, currently many trials carried out are in groups which actually don't represent the people that will eventually use the drug, which is a bit stupid in my view. For example, women are often underrepresented in trials, which means less data is available about how the drugs affect them specifically. Another example is often trials exclude older people who tend to have more comorbidities and complications, and we need to make sure that the relevance of the trial population is assessed when the trial is authorised. Now on to a more controversial issue, and that's the Ethics Committee. I'm rushing because I haven't got much time. Much has been said about the Commission's omission of the Ethics Committee, the term Ethics Committee, and the German press last week had a field day. I don't know if you saw this. The Commission tried to avoid the issue of ethics committees because of the diversity across Europe. And whilst I agree we shouldn't be too prescriptive, I want to clarify that ethics committees have an important role both in authorising trials and guaranteeing patients' safety and well-being. And I think it's important to ensure that knowledgeable, experienced patients are involved in the authorisation of trials, because at the end of the day, that's who's affected most. I'm also proposing the Commission sets up a platform where ethics committees from across Europe can learn to work together and exchange best practice. My final point is my main focus of the report, which is transparency of trial results. Lack of transparency of clinical trial results has reduced public trust in medicine. Independent academics often find it difficult to get the data they need to verify results and carry out systematic reviews. Unsuccessful trial results are often never published or made available at all, and trials can be carried out repeatedly before it becomes public knowledge that they're either ineffective or dangerous. The Commission's taking some big steps forward in terms of transparency by proposing a publicly accessible EU database holding information on all trials, successful or not. However, in my view, a simple summary is just not enough. I don't think it goes far enough. It can be biased and misleading. I want to oblige sponsors to publish a full clinical study report. This is the bit that's controversial, on the EU database. There are already international guidelines on clinical study reports, which are a comprehensive account of how the trial was carried out and what the findings were. And many sponsors already prepare these reports, which is submitted when applied for marketing authorisation. It includes a simplified summary, but also much fuller results that can be analysed and checked by independent researchers. Clearly, patients take part in a trial to help advance medicines and themselves and other patients, not really to help any particular pharmaceutical company. So it is important. Sharing more knowledge about the trial results will not only increase trust in medicines, but accelerate the development of life-saving treatments. It won't compromise data protection, as some people have said to me, because all personal patient data will be anonymised. Truly commercially confidential information will be treated in line with existing legislation on access to documents. And if sponsors don't want to meet their responsibility in terms of transparency, then member states have got to impose fines. It may be extra work, especially for academics, and I know that, because they're not looking for marketing authorisation. But I think the rewards of having a higher quality of available scientific data and sharing vital knowledge will be worth it. So, what I'm trying to achieve in the European Parliament is a balanced report, something that strips away the unnecessary bureaucracy but demands more transparency from the sponsors. Something that better harmonises what we're doing across Europe while still allowing for thorough assessment of trials by the ethics committees and with patient involvement. From the first debate that was held this week in the European Parliament, we seem to be all moving more or less, apart from one or two bits, in the same direction. So we hope we can reach an agreement with EU governments by the end of this year. I want to make sure it's done before the European elections, because this is too important to lose this legislation. So it needs to be completed certainly by June next year. So hopefully we'll stick to those timelines. Thank you very much.